Hello and welcome to another Made in England with me, Richard Vobes. And in today's Made in England, we're going to be exploring a whole host of things from Scrooge to Enid Blyton, the Secret Seven. Yes, I want to ask, what is a groat? And also, who is that strange hunched bloke with such a burden on his back? We'll answer all of that in this unique episode on the 28th of November 2022 of Made in Good Old Blighty. There we are. The lovely Julia, unfortunately, is not with me today. It's just moi. It's just moi. But don't let that worry you. Now, if you've never come here before and you're new to the channel, and I know we had a video over the weekend that just went absolutely, completely and utterly ballistic. It's never happened to me before, and I'm very thrilled to have that. And I know that there may be a number of people checking out the channel for the very first time. They may have subscribed and think, hang on a minute, you were talking about political stuff and the state of play and all that. Then suddenly in my feed, what I'm getting is these, either the English couple being a bit sort of daft, trying to cook things and exploring stuff as a couple, and now what is this crazy sort of homemade television style nonsense? Well, that's what it is. I'm basically an entertainer. If you've come along here for the first time and thinking, hello, where's all the political stuff? That will be going on at the weekend, where I am a little bit more serious and a little bit more concerned about the state of play. In this show, however, we're celebrating England, its history, its larks, its heritage, things that have happened, the reasons that England is such a wonderful and fantastic place. And I hope that you will join me and stay and be part of the growing community that wants to keep England afloat. So we often look back in time and see what happened at certain events in this time. One of the things I want to answer is a question that has been on my mind for a while. We were looking at English money. Good old Fred Cooper very kindly sent in some old English money from the, pounds, shillings and pence. And we were looking at that the other day, and I was trying to decipher and work out what ones were, because I do vaguely remember it, because I am of that certain age that went through the transition, not that transition, no, I've still got my appendage, thanks very much. I haven't gone through that transition, but the transition from pounds, shillings and pence to decimal. That we had to do because we were part of the that very common mark. Oh, they're common over there, aren't they? Well, we sort of got out of that now, haven't we? Well, at least we hope that we've got out of it. At least that's as far as I understand. I am an ignoramus, so what I like about this show is it gives me a chance to learn and share what I've learned, and also learn from you guys who probably know a hell of a lot more than I do. And somewhere in that we'll work it out. So we'll have a look at that a little bit later. What is a groat? It is a form of money. But before all of that, we've got your emails, of course. We've got the film of the week that I want to just talk about, because I watched this film and it did confuse me somewhat. I remember seeing it, and I've talked about this in the Naked Englishman podcast that I do, which is a daily podcast available from Spotify and all the other places that you get podcasts, The Naked Englishman, in which is a behind the scenes of a YouTube creator and a sort of diary, an audio diary of my life, as it were. And I was confused about this film, which I'd watched in the long distance past as a young man and thought it was amazing. Then I rewatched it and went, hang on a minute. And it's a British-English film, so we'll have a quick chat about that as well. But I want to start off, first of all, with what happened on this day, various things in history. John Bunyan, in 1628, cast your mind back to 4:30. No, just before that. John Bunyan, author of the Pilgrims Progess. He was born and he wrote this Pilgrims Progess. And of course, people often refer to it, if ever you're reading bits of history and they go, oh yes, in the Pilgrims Progress this, and they keep referencing. I've never actually looked at the text. Have you ever looked at the text, the Pilgrims Progress? It's apparently it takes place in a bit of a dream. The author, he narrates this thing, and I just thought, because it's such an important piece of work that every Englishman should know at least one line or two from it, and then you can bluff your way through and go, oh, yes, I know the Pilgrims Progress. I know all about that. Then you can quote the one line at them. So I'm just looking here at the very first bit. It's called the first part by John Bunyan, The Pilgrims Progress, in similitude of a dream. I don't know what that means, similitude. Is that similar to? Is that what similitude means? Anyway, at first he starts apparently with this quite long apologies for the book. I didn't read that. And then it gets on to this sequence, which actually it's a bit in oldish English, but it's not that oldish English like Chaucer that you can't understand and you need someone to be able to decipher it for you. It is actually quite nicely written, this. And as I started to read this, I thought, you know what, I could actually follow this in a bit more detail. But I'm just going to share a tiny bit from this, just a tiny bit, so please don't yawn too much. It starts off like this. It says, shall I share the screen? I could share the screen. How do I do that? Here we go. Look at this. I don't know if this really helps. And I can't really blow that up, unfortunately. The Pilgrims Progress. There it is. This is available, by the way, free on the Gutenberg.org thing. It says, as I walked through the wilderness of this world, I lighted on a certain place where was a den, and I laid me down in that place to sleep, and I slept, and I dreamed a dream. I dreamed, and behold, I saw a man clothed with rags, standing in a certain place, with his face from his own house, a book in his hand, and a great burden on his back. I looked and saw him open the book and read therein. And as he read, he wept and trembled, and not being able longer to contain, he brake out with a lamentable cry, saying, what shall I do? And I've got a picture of him, actually. I've got a picture. I suppose you'd like to see a picture of him, the man, the lamentable man. I don't think we got a picture. Didn't have photographs back in the days of John Bunyan in 1628 when he wrote this. But here he is. Look at this. The man with his great burden. Oh, what terrible thing shall I do? What am I going to do? Well, it goes on, the text, you'll be pleased to know, it does go on quite a bit. I won't read all of this now. In this plight, therefore, he was worried and stuff. He went home and refrained himself for as long as he could, that his wife and children would not perceive his distress. But he could not be silent for long, because the trouble increased. Wherefore, at length, he brake his mind to his wife and children, and thus began to talk to them. Oh, my dear wife, said he, and you, the children of my bowels. That's nice, isn't it? I, your dear friend, am in myself undone by reason of a burden that lieth hard upon me. Moreover, I am certain, informed, that this our city will be burned with fire from heaven, in which fearful, yet I do not see, some way that we escape can be found whereby we may be delivered. So he was frightened that the place was going to sort of burn down, from what I can see of that, and I won't read any more of that, and you probably don't want me to overact like some amateur ham that I am. But in a way, it reminded me of the situation that our country is in, that we're in, in which we're sort of threatened by global warming and that everything is going to be doom and gloom. Well, I don't believe a word of any of that, as you probably know, but that's my own humble opinion. But it's interesting, there we are, bit of what was his name? John Bunyan. And apparently with his walking about and all the rest of it, he did get bunions. I don't know if bunions were named after that. No, couldn't be. Anyway, The Pilgrims Progress, it was written in 1628. So now you know, you better pass that on to anybody else. The proper title, I think, is The Pilgrim's Progress from This World to That Which Is to Come. It says here, he wrote it in 1678. Christian Allegory, written by John Bunyan, regarded as one of the most significant works of theological fiction in English literature, and is a progenitor of the narrative aspect of Christian media. I don't know what any of that meant, but I'm sure that's important. So there we go, a little bit of interesting stuff there. And in 1660, not so long later on, now of course we know 1660 was the Great Fire of London was 1666. 1660 was when old Charles II came to the throne, wasn't he? The great, isn't that when he came back? I've got to make sure I know my history. I'm sure that's what that was. Anyway, meanwhile, at Gresham College in central London, 12 men, including Christopher Wren, Robert Boyle, John Wilkins, and Sir Robert Murray, founded what was later to become the Royal Society, an organisation dedicated to the promotion of excellence in science. I don't know if the Royal Society had anything to do with the promotion of the recent pandemic and all the nonsense that came out of that. But in the original setup, they seem to be very good. Founded on the 28th of November, on this particular day in history, granted royal charter by King Charles II as the Royal Society, and it's the oldest continuingly existent scientific academy in the world. Now, one bloke... This might be a bit bookish today. I didn't mean it to turn out this way. One bloke, Robert Hooke, was a member of the Royal Society. And if you want a good read about Robert Hooke, who invented Hooke's Law, which is something to do with springs, as I understand it, he was a curious bloke. And this is by Lisa Jardine. It's a brilliant book. I read this years ago. The Curious Life of Robert Hooke, the man who measured London. And he was fascinated in microscopes, in watches, and I think his rival really was Christopher Wren. And he was a bent-up double old bloke and died in horrible circumstances, poor old Robert Hooke. It's a fascinating read, but he also built a load of churches. When Christopher Wren, after the Great Fire of London, came up with this huge plan of having sort of central areas with everything radiating out so that they could rebuild London after the Great Fire, which never happened, of course, because people were too busy building their houses back before these guys could get themselves organised to say, this is the new plan. Meanwhile, higgledy-piggledy London continued to be higgledy-piggledy London. But a whole load of churches were rebuilt by Robert Hooke, and sadly it seems that all of Robert Hooke's churches, I think bar one or something like that, he wrote and he built or did the designs for a number of churches after the Great Fire of London, and he was uncredited for many, and some have been credited to Christopher Wren instead of him. Absolute fascinating read of somebody who was very important, and he was, what do they call it, somebody who has the ability to do lots of different things. It'll come to me. He was what is it? Not an oligarch. I don't mean that at all. He was an omnimath. No, wait a minute. Is it an omnimath? He was anyway, one of them. So that was fascinating. There is another book that I have yet to read, actually. I bought this on the strength of having read... Find him fascinating. This is by Stephen Inwood, The Man Who Knew Too Much, The Strange and Inventive Life of Robert Hooke, from 1635 to 1703. And I can't remember what that word is, where you have when you're disciplined in so many different things. It's a fascinating book, but definitely well worth a read. So there we go. And whilst I'm just reminding myself, I want to say a big thank you to Kaz Smith. Kaz, in the English Couple, the other programme that we do from earlier today, you very kindly sent us this English tea shop. Now, I wanted to show it off a little bit more in more detail because we will be opening these. This is an advent calendar, I believe, with English tea on the inside. Organic Advent tea calendar, 25 tea bags, 13 different flavours. And the lovely Julia and I, hang on, let's see if I can get the old webcam up here. Julia and I will be looking at this. We'll open this on the 1st, which is Thursday, and it should be very lovely to sample that tea. And also to go with it, some English, look at that, ginger and lemon, all butter biscuits for the tea to go with us. So that's very kind. Thank you so much. People have been so kind and very, very generous sending us bits and pieces, which is lovely. So that's terrific. Right, I want to race through some of these. Found it. Oh, you've done that. On 1757, on this day, William Blake, he was a poet, wasn't he? He introduced a poem. Now, you'll all know this, very important man, a name to be reckoned with. Of course, we all know William Blake. He was famous for, what was it called? And did, hang on, I've got to have a bit of reverb for this. And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains. Green. I'm not a singer, as you can tell. But that's the poem. He wrote the poem. He was an English poet. He was born on this day, and he was a printmaker. He was largely unrecognised during his life. Yes, he lived for a while in, just outside Bognor. Begins with W, and I can't remember the name of the blooming place. I made a video down there. I want to say Wepham, but I don't mean Wepham. It's anyway, it's near Bognor, on the way, the other side of Bognor. People are going to go, "Oh, Richard, you fool!" I made a video there when I was walking to it. I probably will forget to. I'll try and link to it. But we go past. Did we go past his house? Can't remember. I think we do. I think I'll go past William Blake's house. And we didn't go in or anything like that. Anyway, he's now considered a seminal figure in the history of poetry and visual art of the Romantic Age. He wrote this poem and did those feats in ancient time. It's best known as the theme, of course, in Jerusalem, with the music by Sir Hubert Parry, who also lived nearby in Rustington, I think he lived, and the famous orchestration by Sir Edward Elgar. So, of course, we all knew that. Absolutely, we did. Let's have a pause from the things that have happened in history, and let us have a look at some of the emails that have been sent in. And you can send an email.
Send an email to richard@vobes.com.
And I would love to get one from you about anything that you get in the show, or things that we talk about, or anything related to England and Englishness. So let's go into the email bay, and Colin got in touch, and he said, Richard, with the risk of being too forward, I should like to offer Scrooge with Alistair Sim as my favourite old British film. Brilliant acting by all the cast and a brave attempt at special effects, albeit in the early 50s. Yes, 1951 that film was. He says, I wonder, however, if any of your followers who also love this film have noticed when Scrooge, delighted at the end that he hasn't missed Christmas, goes over to the bedroom mirror and sees a reflection of the film's cameraman with his old-style camera. Sad of me, I have seen the film many times and I always look out for this take. All the good wishes from Colin. Thank you very much, Colin. And do you know, I downloaded the film. I tried to look, and yes, I couldn't get a very good screenshot. I wanted to show people exactly what you meant. He goes over there, and you can see the head of somebody. I couldn't see the camera, but I saw the head of somebody peering out, and then it disappears. Absolutely brilliant. But I have got, just for those, because it's such a wonderful thing to look at, here is, of course, the genius of Alistair Sim, a fantastic actor who was in so many of our English films. Scottish, I think he is himself, but that's no hold back to us. We love to promote our English films with whomever has something about themselves that is wonderful, and that is Alistair Sim for us. Isn't that brilliant? It certainly is. And we have another email. Let's do that whilst we're in the email thing. And this is from Jill, who says, Richard, you may be interested to know, we were talking about actually Clive of India the other day. And Clive of India had quite a lot to do with Powys Castle in Welshpool. There is a display of many items he brought back from India. Very interesting. I have been through Welshpool. I don't think I've actually stopped. I've been on their way somewhere else. He also had quite a lot to do with Walcott Hall, Lidbury North. Built it, can't quite remember, she says. Haile Selassie stayed there during World War II, I believe, she says. Anyway, if you're ever back in this part of the UK, I think it would be lovely, interesting to investigate with you, for you and the lovely Julia. Sorry, I can't read at the moment. Best wishes to both of you, and please keep on with the fabulous videos from Jill. Thank you so much, Jill, and appreciate the comments there. That's so very kind of you. It's lovely to be able to do all the stuff we do on the show. Now, let us go and have a look at what is a groat. I wanted to answer this because I've often seen this written down, or people use it. I'm going to go earn a few groats. And I think to myself, well, I never actually found out what it really is. So hang on a minute. I want to find out here. So according to, here's a picture of a groat. Shall we have a look at the picture of a groat first of all? Let's cast our eyes. Here we go. This is the first earliest groat in the reign of Edward I. And the thing about the groat, I have to come off this to get back into the other bit of the computer. This is homemade television, by the way. It's a coin, of course, as you could see there. The groat is the traditional name of the now defunct English and Irish silver coin worth fourpence. It's also a Scottish coin, which was originally worth fourpence, and then later issues were valued at eightpence and a shilling. Now, here is the thing is, it was after the French silver coin had circulated in England that an English groat was first minted under Edward I. And it was called this groat. I don't know why it was called a groat, but this is what I found really interesting. Since it was, how does it get to become fourpence? It's to do back then with the sterling aspect. Now, this is a bit complicated, but we'll race through this. Since the pound sterling, or 240 pence in the old money, was based on the 12th century Tower pound, a Tower pound, I had to quickly work this out, is a pound that was in the Tower of London. And that's the measurement they go from this particular pound. So they called that the Tower pound, which is 5,400 grains of sterling silver. This is when money actually was worth something. Money actually contained the something. It's not just now a token of something. It actually had value in itself, which is why you would have the chippers who would chip off. They would chip off a bit of the money and melt them down to sell as bits of silver or gold, and you'll see all these old coins. So that was effectively a groat. Anyway, it goes on into all of that. But it's worth fourpence. The interesting thing was a groat was it ceased to be minted in the UK up until 1856. So that's what is that? Nearly 200 years ago. Not quite. Was it 170 years or something like that? Anyway, that is a groat. If ever you wanted to know, you probably knew that, but it came up in something, and I thought, I will look that up. I will look it up. Right. Now we've got some more what happened in history, but I want to talk about this film called Blow Up. Do you remember Blow Up? It was 1966, the film, with David Hemmings. There was other people in the cast. Let's have a look. I've got a picture of this may jog your memory. Here we go. Blow Up. Michelangelo. Hang on, not Michelangelo. Michelangelo Antonio. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Antonioni's British film, 19. Vanessa Redgrave, that was the one. Sarah Miles was also in it. I don't remember all these other actresses. I remember Vanessa Redgrave. Most peculiar film. David Hemmings. He was very good in it. I have to admit, he was brilliant in it. But it was very confusing. Now, I'd love to hear from people who've seen that film and could really explain what it was about. Because it was the film in which, very briefly, he's a photographer, if you've not seen it. He's a photographer. He's a fashion photographer. He's very, very busy, and he's trying to put together a number of things all at once. But one of the main things is an art book, which I think they're going to sell. And as his day goes along, he goes into a park to get perhaps some more shots to put into his book, maybe an end piece. And he sees a couple, and this couple are sort of canoodling in the park, or at least that's what seems to be going on. And he takes some pictures. Well, various other things go on. It's all a bit mad. And then eventually he's developing these pictures. But the woman has spotted him in the park taking pictures and said, I want the roll of film. I want the film from you. And he says, well, no, I need the pictures. She's very adamant. Anyway, as he develops these pictures in private, in the privacy of his studios, he discovers there's something going on in the background, going on in these pictures with this couple. There's somebody with a gun, and later on he discovers there's been a murder. Now, if you've not seen it, I don't want to give away too much because you may want to see it, but I can warn you that it is not an easy film. It's very long, it's about 2 hours, and it takes forever to get going, and things happen which have absolutely no reason or adding to the thing. I think the premise of the film is really good, but it just drove me mad watching it the other night. and thinking, come on, get on with it. What's that got to do with anything? So if there's anybody who knows that film, it's an English film, Blow Up, 1966. Do tell me what it's about, what the overall meaning. It seems to be a bit of an art film, really. So I did struggle with that. But the acting from David Hemmings is good. But some of it's all a bit stilted. And as I say, most peculiar things happen in the video that I couldn't quite understand. Now, in 1814, on this day, the Times newspaper was, for the first time, printed by automatic steam-powered presses built by some German inventors, and it signalled the beginning of the availability of newspapers to mass audiences. Now, I found this interesting because I've been reading another book. I'm reading this book at the moment called The Invention of Murder by Judith Flanders. How the Victorians revelled in death and destruction and created modern crime. And one of the things that's interesting, it goes through a number of Victorian murders, cases that went to trial, people were hanged. It's a fascinating book. But the emphasis is about sort of how it was publicised and how people revelled, as it says, revelled in the murder. And it became one of those things that people loved to sit down and read all about it. But it also tells you how a number of the newspapers, the broadsheets, the stage plays, even plays with marionettes travelling around, changed the facts to suit themselves, to sell more. And the Times, you think of the Times as being, albeit, a conservative newspaper and very sort of up and proud, and you would imagine to be absolutely 100% accurate and spend time working everything out. But like so much of mainstream media now, it was ever making up, changing the facts. One of the interesting things, somebody would murder somebody, we found out, and go to trial. So at this stage in British juries, in British justice, he is innocent until proved guilty. He's presumed innocent, and the prosecution are going to prove that he's guilty, and the defence are going to say no, he's not, and they'll back that case away. And the jury of 12 just men will sit there, and women, of course, will sit there and work it all out, and then come up with a conclusion. Well, in this day and age, of course, as a result, really, of what happened in the past, you can't talk about it publicly because you don't want to influence the jurors to make the wrong decision. You want justice to happen. Of course we do. It makes perfect sense. But back then, people were presumed to be guilty and were even spoken about as guilty, even when the trial had yet to go. And the Times was one of the worst of the newspapers, according to Judith Flanders, and there's a huge amount of research gone into this. You can tell when you read it in the footnotes and all the rest of it. And she's checked up. And so you get the facts of the story, the actual case, it's waiting for trial, and yet the paper is already saying how guilty the person is, how he did it, and the facts, which aren't even correct, which must be surely prejudicing the case, and there must have been so many people who were hanged, who were not necessarily guilty, or that there was something going on. So I was really surprised when I read that about the Times, and I thought people were, in the past, with newspapers, more scrupulous than they are today, but it seems not. So it just goes to show you can't believe anything that's printed in black and white, probably not even the books that you read. It just makes you distrust so much you can't distrust it. But anyway, there we are. On this day in 1814, the first time a newspaper was printed en masse by steam-powered presses. So that's interesting. In 1967, on this day, this is why I find this on this day interesting, because it's just full of these nuggets of stuff about England that opens your eyes. All horse racing in Britain was suspended indefinitely to help prevent the spread of foot and mouth disease. And of course, in 2001, that happened again, did it not? In 1968, the death of the children's author Enid Blyton, or Enid, I should say. I always used to call her Enid. I don't know why. Enid Blyton. She wrote more than 800 books, and many people, of course, grew up. She was brilliant, I think, for teaching kids to read. And I grew up, and a lot of English people. I mean, I know they say she only used X many words in the book, and of course these days everybody's reissuing the books, and they've dumbed them down, or they've taken out some of the empire language or the imperial stuff, and some of the the comments of the racist comments. And I can understand that you don't want to be offensive to anybody, and you can understand why perhaps they've changed some of the names of things and taken out certain words. Okay, there are certain words that she used, but of the time, people are of that time. But I think the wokery people are even trying to get rid of all of that, and yet it's an institution. It's where we grew up from. It's where people like me. And, I know people want to cancel people like me for having the views that I might have, but it's part of our life. It's part, the secret seven, the famous five, the terrible threes, the what was it? I don't think the terrible twos. The waneful one. No, that's not one either. But all of that. The lashings of ginger beer and all that. There is a certain element of Englishness in there. Take away of some of those other things, but there's so much Englishness that she gave to us, which is interesting. And I've got a picture of her. We may as well shove a picture of there we are. There's Enid Blyton. And yes, she was a bit posh, and she probably held some views and things, but I think we cannot look at people in the past from today's sensibilities. We cannot. We have to look at them in the way that they were grown up and the world that they lived in. It's the only way. And finally, my last story is this one here, which I found fascinating. In 1971, getting closer to modern day, lots of things obviously happened on a day in history. An English farmer, get this, because I'd be interested in your thoughts on all of this. An English farmer uncovered a major immigrant smuggling operation. 1971. I'm not talking about today with all the immigrants coming over, or the illegal immigrants coming over. An English farmer uncovered a major immigrant smuggling operation when he rammed a plane which landed at a disused airfield on his farm in Kimbolton, 10 miles from Huntingdon. The pilot escaped, but the police officers arrived soon after the incident and detained the 5 occupants of the plane, who were presumably these immigrants trying to get into the country. The thing that made me smile, a wry smile, is today, of course, the farmer would be the one who was arrested, and the 5 immigrants on the plane would, of course, be put up in plush hotels and have GP appointments and be paid, and they'll be able to turn the heating on during the winter. They won't be affected by anything that Jeremy Hunt has done, if it happened today. But back in 1971, when there seemed to be a little bit of sensibleness going on, the actual 5 people were arrested rather than the farmer. So there you go. How about that? A state of affairs going on. Bit of politics thrown in as well. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed presenting it. We'll be back again tomorrow with another Made in England. More fun and thrills and spills. But until then, take care. Bye-bye.